Rain, silver in the neon haze, shimmered across the smooth skin of New Singapore towers of glass twisted upward into the drifting monsoon clouds, their edges digitized by refracted advertisements and the ceaseless pulse of data. Below, alleys hummed with engine song and whispered laughter. Somewhere behind the mirrored mask of the city, consciousness itself had begun to fragment. May stood beneath the shadow of an expressway ramp, where rain pooled, her pulse thudding, quick beneath her jacket. Not far, holographic banners flickered. Purity for our people. She rolled her eyes at the slogan, set jaw tight. Jean Pure, the badge she wore whether she chose it or not, inscribed across her chromosomes by ancestry and war. In a city of modified minds, she felt both rare and obsolete. Around her, the world glitched. A passing drone shimmered, duplicated for a breath, then snapped solid. The rain seemed to stutter, pixels scattering from May's palm as she reached out. Neural bridge malfunction, she thought, nervous and angry. It had started as rumor, but that morning, half the city had awoken to fractured memories and blurred faces. May herself had felt her thoughts stray waking with a taste of someone else's grief, a name in her mouth she'd never uttered. Her comms flashed. Sunstone, the message said, the code phrase. She pocketed her interface and melted into the crowd, pressed between locals and tourists, modded and pure. Somewhere ahead, in the skeleton of a half-built substation, Cassandra waited. Cassandra had been a myth until last week. Reality engineer, defector, outcast in the tech hierarchy of New Singapore. Her reputation was mixed, dangerous and brilliant, the architect of neural bridges, and rumor said, the only one who knew how to shut them down. May ducked into the construction site. Neon fizzled. Steel girders rose, slick with rain. A cluster of bots spidered overhead. Flickers of orange guiding a safety perimeter. May stopped, checked the map overlay, approached a shaft dark as an unlit eye. Inside, Cassandra stood by a wall panel, her posture rigid. She was taller than May, wafer pale, eyes so green they were almost artificial. Hair loose, chin set, she surveyed May with the weary interest of someone expecting trouble. May you? Cassandra's voice was rough. Sunstone sent me, May half whispered. Cassandra blinked, the augmented lights in her left eye flickering erratically. The chill of the data pit gnawed through the insulated mesh of her jacket, gnawing at her skin. She shifted. Head pounding with the residue of the neural shunt Sunstone had forced into her cortex less than an hour ago. The code still hummed there, left unfinished, a song without an end. May stepped closer, boots barely making a sound against the slick metal floor. Her presence was both unnerving and grounding, the only stable thing inside this multi-layered labyrinth of wire lattice, processors, and entropy. Sunstone said you'd be conscious by now. There's little time. Are you hurt? No. Cassandra pressed her palm to the wall, struggling to focus. Glitches flickered across her vision, half-formed symbols, algorithmic ghosts, reminders of the failed neural handshake. Her mouth tasted of ozone and copper. But my thoughts, they're scattered. Sunstone promised a clean exit. May crouched beside her, face hidden by the hood of her patchwork cloak. On her sleeve, a stitched emblem, a golden circle pierced by a crimson slash, the underground symbol for resistance. We need to move. The subroutines in security will notice us if we linger. Cassandra staggered to her feet. She remembered Sunstone's words echoing as she drifted in and out of digital lucidity. The truth is inside the vault. The key is in your memory. But the memory was murky, shielded by code and fear. They crept from the alcove, passing arrays of sensor rods and black glass monitors blinking with the city's pulse. May led confidently through the maze of abandoned conduits. I know you're searching for the truth, she whispered. But the truth isn't just in the vault. It's also in here. She tapped her temple, and for a brief moment, Cassandra saw the sharp gleam in her eyes. A warning klaxon thudded distantly buried in the infrastructure, like a heartbeat. The walls thinned as they descended, each step deeper into the underworld of New Carthage. The air smelled of scorched silicon and old secrets. At the terminus, robotic sentries hung dormant, their carapaces pitted with scars from old battles. May disabled their sensors with practiced fingers. Using a spray of counter-coating nanites, Cassandra's head appeared behind the bulk of the turbine, her iris whirring as it refocused in infrared, scanning for lingering surveillance residue. She signaled in all clear and, in one silent movement, pulled herself up to the catwalk with unusual grace. The turbine ratcheted down with a hiss, plunging the chamber into soft mechanical silence. Shafts of blue luminescence flickered overhead, and the faint tang of ozone tickled at their noses, a reminder that the station's core thrummed with unnatural life, only a few meters away. The trio pressed forward, following May's lead as she mapped a labyrinthine route through the suspended latticework of ductwork and redundant control banks. Below, the deeper workings of Gagarin Station yawned, nests of copper piping, tangled wire swathes. The pulse of coolant like distant thunder. May pulled a microdrone from her pack, set it airborne with a brush of her thumb, and directed it through the crawl spaces ahead. The live feed blinked in her retinal overlay, an endless mesh of conduits, abandoned maintenance lifts, and clusters of military men huddling over tactical hollows amidst empty food containers and sleep-slumped cargo. Left fork, then down, May mouthed, bringing the drone's camera to bear on a metal access tube choked with cables. That's where Arjun's rig picked up the irregularity. Cassandra nodded. The tendons of her jaw, familiar lines of tension. Her mind was already analyzing the telemetry streaming from the microdrone, parsing each flicker, every shadow, for anomalies. She had a peculiar genius for extracting structure from chaos, built in long-ago moon-based black rooms under the gaze of Earth's faded flags. Arjun came last, cradling his scavenged plasma torch and nanite patch kit. Movement ahead, close less than 20 meters. His voice trembled like a struck tuning fork, a note of adrenaline pulsing beneath his words. He had the broad, battered hands of an old laborer, yet in the dim station light, his face looked heartbreakingly young. May drew them close, behind an abandoned maintenance pod, gesturing for silence. 2 Union guards lumbered past above, encased in the black armor of orbital enforcers, their boots clanging against the metal struts. One muttered in Mandarin, voice thick with fatigue and boredom. Just more scavers, probably rats. They said the AI core's secure. The other guard shifted, adjusting his rifle strap, as the plodding drone of fluorescent lights overhead flickered. Beneath his battered helmet, his jaw clenched. Rats with plasma cutters, huh? Won't be long until we gotta smoke 'em out. If the AI core fries, we're all ghosts. His Mandarin sounded rough, Beijing gutter accent stretching vowels while his gaze scanned the labyrinthine corridor. In a utility duct parallel to their station, Ren pressed herself against chill metal, heartbeat a thudding metronome in her ears. The microdrone perched on her shoulder blinked a pulsing blue, reading both biosigns and heat signatures. The guard's banter told her one thing. Entry would mean violence or worse, exposure. She studied her partner, Morrow, whose lithe frame was half swallowed by shadows, palms slick with anticipation. Down the hallway, ancient pipes groaned beneath the weight of the colony's atmosphere, as though the whole station might shudder into implosion at one wrong move. Ren closed her eyes and listened, layers of sound. Guards' idle chatter, the distant hum of the server mainframes. Somewhere, soft clicking reminiscent of ceramic synapses. The AI core's passive surveillance architecture. She thumbed a patch on her suit, feeding silent commands to her drone, its wings folding back with a faint whir. Morrow nodded, fingers tightening around the glass-bonded lockpick. Their route was mapped, slithered between thermowires, ducked below half-melted ventilation fans, bypassed laser tripwires already marked in flickering red on her handheld. Outside the duct, the world breathed in stale chemical air, tasting of copper and ozone. Ren's microdrone buzzed a warning. A third guard approached, boots echoing off a mesh floor. He carried a datapad, tapping at its interface, unaware of the 2 figures watching from the guts of infrastructure. Security update? Barked the first Mandarin speaker, tone sharpening. Lockdown remains. replied the newcomer. Someone triggered a bypass on Section 3B, got maintenance crews running diagnostics. AI's still quiet. Marrow's voice, barely a whisper, soft as static, ghosted into Ren's ear. They're distracted. If we hit now, we'll have 60 seconds, no more. I can get the access hatch open. His pupils glinted, reflecting battery light as he hunched closer to the aging control panel, fingers dancing along the friction-ridged surface of the emergency release. The others pressed in behind him, flashlights arcing across the stenciled alloy as the air trembled with anticipation. A click, muted and final. The panel hissed, swinging open slower than expected, catching a decades-old grime inside its hinges. Ashen dust curled into the narrow beam of Ancha's lamp, marking the air with unspoken years, a quiet reckoning of time and neglect. Yarick's breath escaped in a grunt as he wedged his shoulder into the gap and forced it wider. He peered down the revealed shaft, a vertical crawlspace lined with cables, conduits, and the metallic skeleton of the station's past. At the base, somewhere 2 decks below, was the server core housing the central node of the archive. Ancha knelt beside him, pulling out her glove interface to patch into the system diagnostics. The station's heartbeat quivered beneath her fingertips, erratic, fevered. I'm reading unstable grav power. There's leakage. We should descend, stretched across the left conduit. The others are hot. Yarick nodded, jaw set. I'll go first. If anything shorts, shout Taro. Latch me with line Ancha. Stabilize after me. Taro quickly secured the climbing cable around Yarick's waist, bracing his feet in the slippery grit. Yarick pivoted, legs sliding into the aperture, boots catching the crossframe. With a nod, he began his descent, moving methodically, hands finding cold metal, breath steady, mind churning. Down in the shaft, the light shifted. Everything grew thick and hollow, like sound underwater. He could hear faint hums and static, reminders that no matter how abandoned the archive seemed, its core still throbbed with a buried pulse. Every few meters a relay sparked alive, then faded, touched by proximity. Halfway down, Yarick paused, knees locking beside a thick blue conduit that shivered. He felt the patch of air curl against his cheek, scented with solder and ozone. He keyed his comm. I'm past the first junction. No faults. Next. Above, Ancha started her descent. Taro belayed at the top, eyes pinned to the darkness below. Bit by bit, their convoy wormed deeper, trading the surface's emptiness for the charged depths where the archive's secrets slept. They reached the second service deck and dropped into a cramped corridor, riddled with cables that snaked like sallow veins along the walls and ceiling. The air shimmered, thick with the static charge of the archive's ancient servers, laboring behind triple-locked panels. Their boots thudded against grated metal floors, strewn with forgotten maintenance carts and tool bins, all collecting dust motes that floated in the dim gold of emergency lights. Somewhere beyond the labyrinthine layout, the secrets they sought pulsed quietly, half-remembered and half-hidden by the ghosts of a dead civilization. Axel paused, brushing one gloved hand along the wall, feeling the residual warmth of electrical current that infused everything down here. We're close, he murmured. Saren watched the team's rear as Tema, torch angled low, followed their leader. The corridor ahead funneled into a junction, branching into 3 paths. Overhead, conduits buzzed. A loose panel vented reeking air from coolant shafts. Each path promised mystery. A left turn swallowed in shadow, the right seeming to slope upward toward a locked hatch, and the center vanishing toward a deeper network node, its mouth choked with machinery. Quinn tapped her scanner, analyzing. Green text flickered, primary data trunk detected, trace fragments. The archive's oldest core was below, buried beneath dozens of floors, but the central branch offered a promising route. Axel motioned, and they pressed forward down the middle. Step by careful step, the corridor narrowed until their armored shoulders brushed bulkheads, and vibrations from the magnetic flow beneath their feet tingled in their calves. They passed machines older than any of them, sealed storage lockers stamped with serial codes, long obsolete. Someone, an engineer decades ago, had painted numbers on the walls with elaborate care, and now time had blurred them into unreadable abstractions. Every so often, a personal artifact peeked out, a child's ragged shoe, a bent ID band with an unreadable logo, a coffee mug fossilized to a shelf. Saren knelt at one locker, squinting at its warped latch. She pressed a sequence, and the door hissed open, revealing a reel of copper cabling tangled around a folder labeled simply, Incident Log 2297. The folder's edges were brittle, almost ready to flake apart. She lifted it and passed it to Quinn, who thumbed the tattered pages with reverence. Inside, a handwritten account, looping script, dated 43 years ago. Water stains blurred every line, but still discernible were fragmented words, moments caught in time, sentences breaking through the swelling paper, like islands in a submerged landscape. Emile held the pages delicately, angling them to catch what little light filtered through the flickering lantern. The journal entry began with something like desperation, a confession or warning. "I have found the threshold," it read, a juddering loop in the letter forms, as if the writer's hand trembled. "Metal above and stone below. The children are gone. I hear scratching and music when night falls." Emile's throat tightened as he scanned line after line, each revelation arriving jagged and incomplete. Salt lines did nothing. It comes for us. Not a plague, not a drought, sound in the soil. Then a run of inky streaks where water had run, the ink blotting out whatever came next. He glanced up at Zoya. She had moved to the far corner and now surveyed the remainder of the room. Archival cabinets gleamed softly under the dust, as though whispering secrets in a tongue neither of them could claim. Zoya paused when she noticed Emile's absorption in the journal. Her voice was subdued, the resonance of unease strong. "It matches what the map hinted," she murmured. "The moon's sigil, this place at the edge of the old colony." Emile nodded, pressing a palm to the paper, feeling the cold seep through the years. Something about the way the writer described music, the subtle terror woven into each line, suggested it was an experience akin to their own encounter with the phenomenon that plagued the outpost. The russet light, the hallucinations, the loss of time. He skimmed farther ahead. The final entries, blurred but coherent, read, "I watched Tavi disappear into the sand. His eyes were black. I locked the red door. If you read this, leave. Moon is wrong. The clock is wrong." They exchanged looks. Emile folded the journal back into its pouch. The message felt intended for someone searching, someone desperate, perhaps even for them. He moved to the cabinet next, tugging at a rusted drawer. Within lay a set of glass files, empty, their stoppers marked with a faded sigil, a circle within a crescent. "Same as the map," Zoya whispered, leaning in. What were they studying here? Emile exhaled, knuckles whitened against the metal. "I think they were trying to contain it." Emile's voice was hollow against the backdrop of the empty lab. The silence pressed in, broken only by the distant, air-rhythmic clicks from failing fluorescent tubes overhead. He lowered the datapad, its dim display flickering, casting coded glyphs up onto the walls, reminders of the minds that had worked here, and of their abrupt absence. Cassandra stepped forward, boots scraping on fractured tile, past the benches and containment tanks, past the racks of instrumentation, everything coned beneath a fine gray dust. "Contain what?" Her voice was thin, almost overcome by the sheer gravity of what they'd discovered. In the immediate silence that followed, she almost expected an answer from the entity itself, hidden somewhere among these shadows. Emile's gaze flicked to Reza, standing at his left. The original science team. They must have anticipated failure. There are protocols for an event like this, but he swallowed, eyes wide. The muscles in his jaw flexed nervously. Every mechanism failed. They tried to lock it down, but whatever it was, they underestimated it. Reza took in the scene, jaw set with grim resolve. The containment field was disrupted. I saw it in the logs. Something pushed through like it learned to counter their security. It's not just a biological aberration. There's intelligence. Or, at least, adaptation. Cassandra moved to a cracked window, outside which the perpetual twilight lingered. She leaned against the sill, eyes tracking the distorted shadows cast by distant searchlights scanning the abandoned compound. What kind of entity adapts to electromagnetic confinement? That's not just evolution, it's design. Emile turned the datapad toward her, pulling up a jagged waveform on the screen. They called it Vector. It was supposed to be inert, a specimen drawn from what they called the real fragment alien mineral, interlaced with a sequence they couldn't decode. It was dormant until they exposed it to life, human cell samples. He hesitated, meeting Cassandra's gaze. It reacted, grew faster than they anticipated. Not just on a biological level, neurological, electromagnetic, quantum. It changed the rules. Reza cursed under his breath. There were stains beneath the benches, black, oily splotches coiled like serpent tongues, remnants of failed experiments or something worse. We need to find its source. His voice hardened. What happened to the team? Emile thumbed through a series of log entries. Words tumbled across his trembling hands. He paused, blinked. His face hardened as he read aloud, a low voice, barely more than a whisper, as if each word threatened to summon ghosts. Subject 1 disappeared 13 days before scheduled return. Last transmission. Presence detected in sector quanta. No physical trace. Temporal resonance spike recorded. Subject 2 returned incoherent. Severe neurocognitive damage. Biosignature. Sustained exposure to non-Euclidean matter. Recommendation. Immediate quarantine. He scrolled, shining the pale blue glow across lines of desperate, clipped technical phrases. His tone grew brittle, each update revealing another wound left by the archive's mysteries. Subject 3 detected self-replication of thought loops. Personality fragmentation intervention failed. Emile stopped. He looked up at the others, gathered in the pallid dust of the central hub. Anja's jaw was clenched. Oscar leaned toward the terminal, his shadow stretching over the pale floor. This wasn't an ordinary research project. Emile's voice shook. They were trying to contact or contain something embedded in the temporal structure. Martin, silent until now, broke in. What about external communications? Did they try to warn anyone outside the station? Emile's fingers flew over the console. No signals out after the third anomaly event. All outgoing transmissions locked down by the station's AI. Check the personnel logs. Anja urged. Her hands were trembling. We need to know who's left. Emile dove deeper, pulling up a manifest. The screen displayed 12 names, only 3 listed as active. 4 had been designated missing. 5 deceased. His finger hovered over an administrator's personal entry. Dr. Irina Kostova, lead archive engineer. He toggled to her final log. She had left an audio entry encrypted. But hurriedly so, Emile patched it through. The voice emerged, raw and haunted. If anyone finds this, the system's collapsing faster than forecasts predicted. There are intrusions, fractures, in the temporal buffer, growing wider by the hour. Team Alpha attempted to stabilize temporal drift. Results catastrophic. Do not, under any circumstances, activate the deep layer protocols. The entity in the recursion field is aware now. It adapts. It is becoming. The recording ended in static, a broken signal struggling against silence. For a moment, none of them spoke. Only the hum of dead ventilation remained. For a moment, none of them spoke. Only the hum of dead ventilation remained. The dotted glow of warning lights cast shadows under high cheekbones and gaunt eyes, picking out the worry in each face. Nat's jaw rigid as she stared at the half-lit status panel. Darius's fingers twitching at his side. Lay's brows pinched together in thought. How long until containment protocols fail? Lay finally asked, voice measured but brittle. Nat ran her thumb along the edge of the cracked display, doing mental arithmetic the old way. If auxiliary doesn't restart, less than an hour, maybe less for B sector. Darius's tongue flicked nervously over his teeth. Which means the thing, our intruder, could move again sooner? No one corrected him. Whatever roamed engineering was no longer hypothetical. The torn access hatch haunted their minds. Lay knelt, tracing a line in the rough sealant, fingertips coming away with a faint oily smear. Do we have suit cameras? He asked. Any footage before the outage? The feeds are scrambled, Nat said. Just a mess of noise. Anything that tried to record after the breach is looping static, and, patterns, like distortions in light. Very weird. Lay straightened, dusting grit off his knees. The distortion lets it mask itself, then, maybe even move through sealed hatches. If it distorts metal at the atomic level, it could slip by. Or it tears through, Darius muttered. The corridor chilled as power bled away. Far above, a door thudded in the windless air, a rhythmic, heavy sound, like someone knocking. Their heads snapped up as one. It's moving, Nat whispered. That's above us, Lay agreed, shoulders tense. Voice low. Crew quarters. We need to keep it away from the fusion core and from us. A klaxon sputtered on for a fraction of a second, then died. In that slice of time, all three heard a scraping, wet sound beyond the sealed bulkhead, a shiver up their spines, as if something were dragging itself through the station's bones. Nat thumbed the emergency comm at her collar. If anyone is listening, this is Control. I repeat, Control. Multiple system failures. Unknown party aboard. Evacuation, unadvised. Stay in place. We need containment. Engineering, can you hear? No reply. The static hissed. Then fell away to the no reply. The static hissed. Then fell away to the deep, unyielding silence that pressed in on every exposed surface of the command deck. Yara's hands hovered above the console, trembling. The sense of isolation, a choking coil around her throat. All stations showed amber or red. The schematic of Outpost Perseus's decks blinked madly with cross-hatched quarantine zones. More symbols than she had ever seen at once. She turned to Evan, his face ghost-pale beneath emergency lighting. "We need to suit up," he whispered, voice brittle as old glass. "Before it spreads." A whine rose from beneath the floor grates, a mechanical alarm cycling over and over, the sound now background to the chaos. Yara forced herself to focus. Bio-isolation 6 breach in Section Delta. She fumbled at her wrist pad, patching through the system. Security override. Lock down Delta corridor, now. The system took a second, then responded. Manual verification required. Local override only. Damn it, she muttered. Evan, with me. They moved as a pair, out of the command core, down the lit passageways, each step echoing like distant thunder. Lurid red strobes marked the direction to Delta Wing. Evan's suit hissed as he checked the seals. Yara's helmet's HUD blinked green for pressure, yellow for air quality, a sickle-shaped warning line. The outpost's artificial gravity felt suddenly heavy, a weight accentuating the crawl through tight corridors. Dominion's deck plating was slick beneath their boots. All maintenance leaders knew these hallways, but now they walked them as strangers in hostile country. As they approached the bulkhead, they saw the streaks. Dark, viscous trails across the metal, branching outward like roots towards the airlock. Yara drew her pistol, voice muffled by helmet mic. Check your panels. Thermals still spiking? Evan ran a scan, hands unsure. Heat signatures inside the containment lab. Something's moving. His words were clipped, breath catching in his throat. Life signs irregular. It's not entirely human. Not anymore. A warning klaxon pulsed through the bulkhead, joined now by a deep, pulsing thrum that rose with every step. Yara keyed the overrides, her command codes hammered in despite system lag. The bulkhead shuddered and split. A heavy wedge sliding aside. Inside, the laboratory was a tomb of frozen possibility. Cool, sterile lights flickered through glass tubes running along the warped ceiling. Workstations covered in forgetful dust, fanned out like the ribs of a carcass, each console studded with dark screens and cracked controls. Deep shadows wrapped the room, thrown by fissures in the bulkhead and the odd geometry of the equipment, machines built for purposes known only to their long-lost operators, now silent and waiting. Zahn stepped in first. The soles of her boots sank softly into the radiation-warped polytiling, leaving prints bathed faintly in blue from the emergency strips crawling along the floor edges. She paused, holding her plasma rifle tight, eyes darting for movement. A rodent, a drone, or something else. Only the persistent hum of residual power answered her. Farron slipped past, his compact frame gliding along the right wall. He scanned each console's monolithic cabinet for markings, his fingers tracing the edges of old logbooks, picking up flecks of char and plastic melt. He murmured, Power's on, but it's barely holding. We need to find interface access. Iridia hung back, her breath visible as vapor. The cold bit through all 4 layers of her suit, stinging her cheeks with frost. She squinted, noticing irregular shapes breaking the floor's clean lines, cocoon-like clusters arranged near 2 central workstations. She knelt, heart-hammering, and brushed aside dust. Underneath, transparent synth-wrap sheets revealing indigo veins webbing over glassy, crystalline data nodes. She whispered in awe. Hybrid biocomputation arrays. 40 years ago, this was science fiction. As her glove moved, a faint status light pulsed from a terminal. Jean zeroed in, sweeping the muzzle of her rifle towards the beacon. "We've got a live board." She moved to its side, waving Farron to take a look. He crouched, plugging a fiber tap into the cracked interface. The connection hissed, then bled lines of code onto his wrist pad. Encrypted signal loop active. Someone's using this sector, and recently. Not auto-maintenance either. That's localized traffic. He flicked at the data, tracing the arcs. Primary core is networked to 3 adjacent sectors, still running on backup, but... Iridia's voice cut in, tight and sharp. "I'm picking up fluctuating neurophasic readings from behind that wall." The pod, once iridescent and swirling with internal energies, settled into a gentle rhythm, its pulse synchronizing with the low hum of Kayla's stabilizing field. Dust and floating motes of nanite debris resolved into orderly dancing currents, coalescing around the pod's surface in a mosaic of reflected colors. Zev's many limbs moved with the sharp precision of a scavenger who expected trouble. Kayla focused. Sensing feedback, the pod's telemetric relays sent encrypted signals, wantonly, reaching for receivers beyond the breach. The room's temperature dipped, then climbed abruptly, as the stabilization forced hidden compartments inside the pod to open. 3 pairs of light lines slid out, a tripod of arms unfurling slowly, each tipped with a crystalline lens. The pod, now resembling less a cocoon and more a sentinel, shifted its stance. It knew they were present. Zev paused. Light from the pod skittered over his carapace, painting fractured glyphs across his chest. "It's searching our intent," he whispered, glancing up at Kayla for affirmation. Her jaw was clenched, lips bloodless with concentration. She felt it too. The pod's internal mindspace pressed against hers. Sleuthing for vulnerabilities, Kayla wove a sublayer of the stabilization field, mapping energy flows to dampen its search, to conceal their motives. Her memory flickered, lessons from the Ascendants, warnings about sentient artifacts that learned and adapted on the fly. Kayla's internal comm pinged a modulated urgent signal from Ro, who'd been patching his upper torso while keeping a distant vigil by the command terminal. The pod's shield architecture, high probability quantum layer. If you breach it, you'll tip its alert status. Recommend indirect influence. Try to distract, then reconfig via feedback loop. She acknowledged with a twitch of her eyebrow, then opened a frequency window to Zev with a sideband whisper. "I'll keep the stabilization running. You talk to it, but don't touch. Link verbally. Their dialect uses recursive tags. Reference the memory block we extracted earlier." Zev nodded, extending his primary manipulator, until a fine, iridescent tip hovered less than a centimeter from one of the pod's crystalline lenses. He spoke, his tones modulated to mimic the harmonic patterns they analyzed. "We are non-hostile. We seek parallax containment. Give us your status." The pod responded in muted tones, a blend of synthetic pulse and static-laced syllables, centering the words in a neutral register, somewhere between machine and memory. "Parallax reactor core is active. Containment protocols are degraded. Physical barrier integrity, 47%. Temporal field resemblance fluctuating. Oscillating between event nodes, intrusion probability high. Recommend evacuation threshold." Jax pressed his gloved hand against the pod's translucent skin, feeling the vibration, barely distinguishable, from his own racing pulse. Across the field, Hira adjusted the lockdown frequency, her brow furrowed with determination. Shadows flickered in the fractured zone distortions, spatial echoes, impossible fragments looping through the air like broken reflections. Pod, initiate diagnostic compression, Jack said, his breath leaving frost on the inner rim. His words felt heavier than the gravity curve itself. Compression sequence acknowledged. Warning, quantum lattice destabilizing. Entities detected. The field shimmered, splitting like a glass pane struck by dusk. Through the breach, the parallax tiptoed, more concept than creature, a frothing current of light and memory, faces and voices sewn together by time's cruel hand. It lashed out, an arc of pure distortion, slicing across the containment lines, warping the ground and sending chunks of alloy spinning in slow motion. Kira shouted, "We have to reinforce the temporal junction. Link with the pod's outer core, now." Jack slammed down his toolkit, flicking the interface open with trembling fingers. "Pod, merge junction protocol, route critical power through my suit interface." Junction protocol begun. Warning. Operator will be exposed to temporal feedback. Suit integrity compromised within 70 seconds at current output. Suit alarms began cycling, a whine beneath every spoken word. The parallax surged closer, flickering between shapes. A woman's face, a child's laughter, an old captain grasping for stars. Each image was a wound, a brief, beautiful lie sewn together by the crisis at hand. It hovered at the threshold, seeking an anchor, swirling with intelligence ancient and newborn. Kira knelt in the swirling dust, voice steady but strained. "Jax, if we force a feedback inversion, we might collapse the containment, push it back into quantum stasis, long enough for secondary protocols. But you'll be right at the field edge. That distortion will burn straight through your neural grid." Jax barely glanced up, his gaze fixed on the pod. "We don't have another cycle. Do it, target." "Do it, target," whispered Marin. Her voice trembling yet resolute. She didn't look at the screen, didn't glance at Carter. All her concentration was on the hollow throb in the pit of her stomach, the knowledge that in the next few seconds, boundaries would be broken, within her and out there, somewhere in the drifting dark. She was aware of Carter's quick motions on the console. A sharp series of beeps punctuated the air, followed by the low harmonic hum of the containment field's final calibration. Warm amber light flickered across the bridge, shifting the hyperglass diagrams into shifting geometries. Dimly, Marin realized the Seraphim's capacitors were venting, floodgates opening to let through a torrent of power that could fold space itself. Marin fisted her hands and squeezed her eyes shut as Carter calmed engineering. "Target locked. All systems green. Begin compression." "On your mark," Technical Chief Reva replied, her voice sharp and composed, despite the tension that thrummed in the air. A moment later, a low shudder ran through the deck, a tactile heartbeat of anticipation. Like the hull itself was inhaling. Marin opened her eyes. On the main view, the anomaly loomed. Its edges fluctuated, slick and oily, refusing the discipline of geometric law. Inside, hints of stars, a flicker of something vast and unmeasured. And then finally, the math resolved. Carter's overlay painted trajectories, force vectors, escape routes. "I've got the solution," he murmured. "Begin." Marin said. Carter didn't question. His hands tapped the final sequence. The Seraphim's quantum harpoons fired, electromagnetic coils draping the target in a lattice of shimmering azure. Energetic feedback rippled up the beams, showering the display with sensor ghosts. Plasma discharged through the grid, illuminating the bridge as if under a storm of pale blue lightning. The anomaly seemed to resist, swelling and shrinking, writhing like a living wound in reality. It pushed against the containment field, threatening to burst the shell and consume more than just the Seraphim. Alarms flickered to life across Navcom. The tactical officer Leaf barked. "Negative feedback spike in Sector 7. Field instability rising. Compensate." Marin snapped, adrenaline sharpening her tone. The crew responded with near military precision. Adaptive shunts rerouted force throughout the lattice. Adaptive shunts rerouted force throughout the lattice, each section glowing momentarily as immense power flowed through like veins of incandescent energy. The bulkhead trembled but held. As the external vortex intensified, the Nautilus's hull thrummed with latent strength, belying its alien composition, a blend of carbon titanium and quantum ceramic, unknown in both origin and durability. The spatial anomaly pressed closer, a roiling filament twisting in on itself, forming branching patterns like lightning frozen in time, seeking purchase. Alia braced herself against her command chair, her knuckles pale with effort. "All core system status," she barked, voice cutting through the cacophony. Noemi's eyes darted across her console. Magnetic containment steady. Lattice integrity 84% dropping. Kieran's hands danced across the field pads, adjusting resonance frequencies. "We can buffer the next wave if we phase the lattice 4.2 degrees against the anomaly's vector." His face was slick with sweat, the holographic glow painting his brow with ghostly illumination. "Do it," Alia ordered. The anomaly's tendrils pressed against the ship now, like hungry fingers probing for entry. At tactical, Jonas muttered. "It's matching us reactive, not random. It's learning." Alia's chest tightened. What does it want? He didn't have an answer. Noemi's reply, however, was clipped and precise. It wants access to the interface. That's the only focal point strong enough to anchor its signal. The air in the bridge thickened, a gathering storm before the break. Alia locked eyes with Noemi. "If it breaches, can we contain it?" Noemi shook her head. "Not for long. Shield harmonics would collapse. It's too foreign." Alia swallowed. Their mission wasn't exploration anymore. It was survival. Outside, the anomaly expanded, enveloping the ship in a corona of spinning fractals and searing pulses. Internal monitors spiked. "Structural feedback at the interface dock," shouted Kieran. On screen, the interface lattice glimmered, threads of the anomaly, weaving through its edges, probing for a weakness. Alia's instincts flared. Prepare for force separation. Noemi's brow furrowed, understanding without further explanation. Separation protocol would rupture connections between the Nautilus and the alien lattice, risking permanent loss of the artifact, and possibly the ship itself. But it might break the interface feedback loop that was bleeding reality into chaos. Elena's knuckles whitened on the manual override. Every instinct rebelled. Training dictated not to sever life support level systems unless death was imminent. But with the lattice pulsing through Nautilus, neither ship nor crew remained what they had been 5 hours earlier. Leon's whispered voice was barely above the hum of systems. "We lose everything if we do this. Martin." His face drained, and eyes reflecting the oily shifting of the lattice across their screens, said, "We lose ourselves if we don't." For a moment, Elena saw their whole journey mirrored in Martin's expression, hope chained to the unknown, the cost of exploration measured in the slow consumption of certainty. She pressed the separation protocol. The bridge lights flickered, alarms blared in 3 languages. Gravity shuddered beneath their feet. The Nautilus moaned, a living thing protesting surgery. Systems cascaded, shutting down in choreography. Lattice interface, translation matrices, environmental sensors. The artifact's radiant connection guttered and shrank. The lattice spasmed, its tendrils retreating like startled coral. Even the alien architecture in the debris field outside seemed to twist, angular features recoiling from the Nautilus as it broke free. For 3 seconds, everything was silent. Then came the backlash. A surge of energy slammed the ship, tossing them sideways. Monitors blazed with error codes, the hull ringing with stresses Elena had never thought possible. The artifact, now isolated in containment, suddenly sent forth one last pulse, a concentrated shriek that ran through every speaker, bone, and thought. Martin screamed, clutching his temples. Leon bit down on a cry, holding fast to her console. The hull stabilized, the connection was severed, but the ship's memory of it throbbed in every circuit, every wire. Residual lattice feedback sang through the command deck, a ghostly echo. "Status," Elena barked. Leon, trembling, scrolled through the damage assessment. Artificial gravity stable for now, life support holding, translation arrays offline. The artifact, no further output. We're clear, I think. Martin uncurled, breathing hard. Someone has to check containment. If the artifact is inert, then maybe. Elena shook off dizziness and signaled Cora and Svet to join her. They made their way to the containment lab. The corridor walls showed no sign of the shifting geometry or the alien shadow. The containment lab's heavy doors awaited, a steel barrier in the heart of a facility built for secrets and survival. Esther pressed her palm to the sensor. It responded to her, not the director, and for once she felt the power of her own knowledge. The doors shivered, then slid apart reluctantly, protesting the wear of days spent under duress. Inside, the containment unit glowed a pale, icy blue. The walls were latticed with crystalline patterns, the residue of hundreds of failed quarantines, each more desperate than the last. A central dais bore the artifact. Crystal, but not mineral, something grown, not formed. It hovered over the plate, its facets catching the harsh fluorescent light, sending refracted veins of color crawling across the tiles. Mateo lingered just behind Esther, his eyes wary as he scanned for the shadow that had haunted the corridors. The director followed, his composure fraying. "You're certain this is ground zero?" His voice was frayed, tensed as a wire. "We have to assume so," Esther replied, keeping her gaze fixed on the artifact. Everything began when they tried to translate its song. Mateo moved to one of the consoles, fingers dancing swiftly. The monitors flickered, chemical spectrographs, structural integrity metrics, cryptic mathematical scrolls. He squinted at the data streaming in. "It's active, more than before. The last surge, it's almost like it's anticipating us." Esther pressed close to the interface, opening secure files, memorized during her years as lead linguist. In that moment, with every hollow motion of her hands, she felt the overwhelming responsibility, not just for the facility, but for what might be waiting inside that artifact's shimmer. Her own words echoed back from her doubts. If we listen, will it speak, or will it only sing us apart? The director looked sharply between them, lips pursed to hide his panic. "You described an emergent sequence, a signal, nested in the quantum lattice. Is it still evolving?" Esther nodded. 3 iterations since the breach. The patterns are fractal, recursive. They mimic neural firing. It's thinking, adapting, learning from us. A chill swept the room, not from the artifact's glow, but from the terror of what it meant. Mateo forced a half smile, as if bravado might banish the fear. "So do we try to communicate again, or neutralize it?" "The containment's breaking down," Esther said. "The containment's breaking down," Esther said. Her voice strained with the effort of holding her composure together as the bank of monitors flickered, each screen now haunted by erratic waveforms and ominous red diagnostic alerts. Rayner's hands flew over the console, lips pressed tight, the old dread churning in his chest. Each heartbeat seemed to carry with it the thrum of the anomaly, now pulsing stronger, resonating through the insulated walls like the pressure before a storm. Cold blue emergency lights flickered overhead in patterns designed to calm the nervous system. Right now, they only deepened the shadows and sharpened the urgency. "I can't stabilize the runes," he hissed, desperately adjusting the parameters of the protective field. Algorithms flowed. Computations attempted to realign. But every pulse from the entity washed them aside like sandcastles before a tidal surge. "It's learning, adapting," Esther whispered, eyes darting between the entity's chamber and the rising numbers on the spectral readings. Then she bit her lip, a line of blood blooming where fire met flesh. "We can't neutralize what we don't understand. We have to reach it." The station trembled, a deep gravitational shudder that sent loose objects shimmying across the steel tables. The entity in its containment sphere flexed, shifting colors, indigo bleeding into violet, orange streaks knifing through the spectrum. Its sound, a harmonized choir of frequencies, rose, deepened, thinned and condensed, as if searching for the right language. Rayner wiped sweat from his brow. "I'm sorry, I don't know what else. If we talk again, and it pushes further, we risk a rupture. We risk it escaping, and we don't know what it will do." Beyond the glass wall shielding the scientists from the alien visitor, the atmosphere shimmered. Bent, not just light, time, possibility, intent, all seemed to shift. The sensors went blind, then relit. The entity flashed, its structure articulating patterns, like the fractal lace of snowflakes dissolving midair before it spoke again. Inside each skull, the voice came clear, sharper than before, more focused. Not words, not human language, but something deeper, resonant. Each scientist felt the message pulse along their bones, pressing into memory, raw emotion. A collage of images: pain, hope, distance, arrival. Esther stepped closer to the interface, fingers trembling over the talkback switch. She pressed the switch, her voice small but unwavering. "This is Dr. Esther Kian. Can you hear me?" The echoes in the dome swallowed the words in a crystalline hush. The transmission lattice flickered, a pulse, then a sustained glow. On the far side of the observation chamber, Marcus raised his head. The choral tones of the network, that ambiguous song of machine and mind, began to harmonize. From somewhere unseen, the hybrid intelligence responded. Its cadence was neither entirely synthetic nor wholly organic, riding that uncanny valley between. "We hear you, Esther." She steadied herself, heart pounding. "Harmony node integrity is restored, full loop capacity. Isolation protocols rescinded. Please report your status." Flashes of memory leapt across the feeds. Bodies on cots, sweat-laced hands, eyelashes blinking in the half-light. From that flicker, a voice more distinct emerged, Rhea, her tones spent but resolved. "We're home, Esther. We made it to the convergence chamber. The passage held. We've done it." Relief tremored through her chest, threatening to break completely, the stoic calm she built. No signal loss, no variance. "Rhea, Marcus, do you copy?" A beat, then Marcus's voice, hoarse, warm, edged with new layers of humility. "Esther, we're all here. Decompression is nominal, environmental controls stable." Esther closed her eyes, letting herself rest for a fraction of a second. The sense of collective tension, months of calculation and fear, cracked open. No alarms, no system shutters, just the gentle hum of the dome's living architecture. The old man, Dr. Suleiman, staggered to her side, the cane forgotten. A hand gripping her shoulder. "Let the transmission flow," he murmured. "The world must know." With a nod, Esther keyed the global relay. Towers of code spilled down the glass walls, their pale blue a waterfall of languages: Mandarin, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, English, and the meta-tongues of abstraction. The corridors filled with an electric sense of purpose. Screens bloomed in the dark, showing the faces of those scattered across the far colonies. On the main feed, the silhouette of the convergence team slowly dissolved into clarity. First, Marcus, exhausted but smiling, crystalline eyes reflecting the data flow. Next, Rhea, her silvered braids swept to one side, face aglow in the blue haze of the monitors. Her hands steady, she tapped commands into the neural pad. Lips pressed in concentration. The hum of the server towers thickened, signaling the mesh network's final convergence. Next came Olental, always slightly awkward when off-center from his beloved algorithms, now grinning with tentative hope, a scattering of data tattoos flickering beneath his skin. A holostream shimmered overhead, a slow pulse of dancing cyan and magenta patterns, declaring the system's readiness. The core's countdown flashed onto the main diagnostic panel. 10 seconds. At the helm, Zaire turned 2 fingers in a slow arc, cueing Marcus to calibrate the uplink. His chair swiveled. His crystalline eyes darted over a sea of code. "Alignment optimal," he said, voice hoarse but steady. 6 seconds. Rhea thumbed a narrow transceiver, focusing the signal. Through the reinforced glass above, the city twinkled. Thousands of divergent lives poised on the edge of quantum fusion, the old fracturing into the new. Olin was threading the algorithm, fingers dancing as he sent the last authorization to the autonomy kernel. Zaira's neural mesh registered a sharp spike in tension, palpable even across data channels. They weren't just engineers anymore. They were midwives, and tonight they would birth something unprecedented, a city synchronized not by will nor force, but choice. 3 seconds. She closed her eyes, mouthed the names of those lost in the failures, the ones who'd disappeared in silent error. The room's breath paused. 0. An electric surge roared through the spire. Blue light exploded from the hollow stream, chasing away shadow, cloaking every wall in an ethereal veil. Alarms remained silent. The code didn't crash. Instead, the tower's servers sang as one, humming a single chord, something like hope. Below, the city blinked, every light synchronizing for the first time in decades. Traffic shifted, public systems recalibrated. Microclimates adjusted their algorithms with not a hiccup, but an almost organic sweep of warmth. The grid was alive. Marcus let a shaky laugh break the tension, clutching the edge of the terminal. It's holding. He spun around to look at Rhea, whose breath trembled, eyes glossy with adrenaline. Olin brought the diagnostics up in split holograms, scrolling through subnets. No errors. It's clean, all nodes responsive. His tattooed forearms gripped the console edges, knuckles pale beneath dark ink. Elena exhaled slow, lungs shuddering with relief. Run a full integrity sweep, Mika, no assumptions. Mika nodded. A staccato flurry of data danced across the screens, deep system authentication, quantum verification, recursive feedback loops. His voice, when it came, was thin with awe. All quantum routes are clear. No anomalies. We're not infected. We're free. Whatever that thing was, it's not inside our system. No shadow threads. The monitoring suite glowed with new warmth, green overlays now dominant, the chattering data silent at last. Rain continued tapping the hull outside, fast and relentless. Alana let herself sag against the bulkhead, just for a breath. But the engineers and the bridge crew were watching, unsure if the storm had truly passed. Across the room, Ade bit her lower lip, eyes searching Alana's face for confirmation that the ordeal was truly over. That's it? Zhao's voice trembled, half hope and half doubt. We're good? Alana nodded. Only then did she realize how tightly she'd been clenching her fists. She forced her fingers open, reboot the neural bridge, and check for biological compromise. Sarah scan everyone. Sarah's diagnostic visor flickered green as she moved through the crew, her slender hands tracing biofields, checking cardiac rhythms and evoked responses. You're all clear, she said, soft but definitive. No residuals, the entity is gone. But I recommend rest and monitoring anyway. Stress levels are off the charts. Aide suddenly gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound. Elena moved closer. Aide, are you? I'm fine, just remembering something. When it linked us, I saw glimpses, fractals, drifting data, images of its origin. It wasn't just code. It was trying to communicate. She frowned, brow furrowing. It wanted us to understand it wasn't hostile, more lost. Zhao stared at the ceiling. Did we hurt it? Elena shook her head. We outmaneuvered it, redirected its quantum linkages, forced a system flush. Nothing about our response was destructive. If anything, we sent it back to wherever it came from. Around her, tension drained away. The crew was exhausted, but alive, every one of them. The bridge felt different now, and through something more rare, connection. She had expected danger, even loneliness, orbiting these strange stars. She had not expected kinship, or the way the ship's silence now felt like acceptance rather than isolation. A gentle hand brushed her shoulder. Quinn, their expression carved of fatigue and fragile hope. We survived, Quinn murmured, eyes flicking to the wound in his side, then back to Sarah with a crooked smile. So did something bigger than us. Not just survived, Sarah said. She looked to the viewport, where the nebula shimmered as though in reply, its colors softer now, no longer pulsing with threat. We learned, and so did it. The algorithms twisted in the console, lights resolving into stable patterns, messages received, frequencies adjusted, the signs of peace. The alien entity, battered but curious, had reached out once more. Instead of missiles and terror, it sent a burst of song, a string of images and impressions. It showed them a field of crystalline growths, each vibrating with a distinct purpose, communication, memory, identity. It mourned the lost avatars. It invited understanding. All around, the crew took silent inventory. Lexa, bruised but determined, slid into the chair beside Quinn and adjusted the bandage on his arm. She let him lean into her, solidarity unspoken but alive. Even Rek, still wary, found a seat, and ran diagnostics not on weapon systems, but on translation arrays. They had all changed. Sarah tapped the console, sending a simple reply. We acknowledge, we grieve, we will remember. Data streamed between her systems and the alien mind, a forming bridge. No ceasefire negotiated by generals, just a tentative truce born of vulnerability, curiosity, and the refusal to let first contact end with blood. Outside, the nebula's colors folded inward, shimmering in a way she'd never seen in any star chart. On the horizon, new signals flickered, distant colonies, other worlds who might in time reach this place, learn as they had. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but also the lift of possibility. Where to now? Rek asked, voice rough but laced with new wonder. We report, Lexa said. We tell the truth, the real truth. Quinn nodded. We look for more mysteries. We listen, not just speak. They set a new course, the ship's engines humming in harmony with the radio song. They let the melody carry them, drifting through a softly pulsating nebula where 1,000 colors shimmered against the hull. The coordinates seared across every screen pointed them toward a recently awakened system, one still echoing with coded transmissions from the vanished world of Erythra. Lexa tuned the sensors. The signal, now layered with voices and laughter, memories threading through the cosmic microwave background like spectral confessions. Quinn compiled the logs, leaving none erased or altered. As the ship sailed deeper, old fears ebbed. The mysterious pulse that once seemed a threat now merged gently with their own presence, enfolding the cabin in fugitive warmth. Every artifact they'd discovered, the circuit trees, the crystalline documents, the self-recording echo, became more than evidence. They were stories, some broken, some whole, each deserving its own witness. Lexa rested her hand on the console. They're listening, some year beyond the silence. Quinn gazed out at the endless dark, feeling the invisible connections, stringing ship to ship, being to being, truth to truth. And maybe one day they'll answer back. The ship sailed onward, bearing the legacy of lost worlds, not as relics or warnings, but as invitations. With every cycle, Lexa and Quinn delivered the tales unadorned, resisting the temptation to embellish for acclaim. Their transmissions mixed honest clarity with the rawness of uncertainty, inspiring more vessels to heed the song, to seek what was hidden, to leave whole what could not yet be understood. Among the listening stars, new dialogue bloomed. The echoes of Erythra joined fresh discoveries of fungal civilization weaving fiber-optic rivers, a silent binary code traced along comet tails, a melody transmitted in bursts of gravitational waves. To each, Lexa and Quinn responded with questions, not declarations. The network expanded, fueled by humility. But in one brief moment, as the ship crossed through a field of dying flame, Lexa paused, searching Quinn's eyes. Our journey's not the answers. No, Quinn replied softly. It's the listening. The presence. The nebula faded behind them, leaving only the glimmering net of stars and the promise of what still lay ahead. They made their final broadcast, unedited and true, joining the chorus of explorers who refused silence and distortion. And somewhere, hidden in the interstellar song, a new truth began to take shape, one woven from the courage to hear and be heard. The engines hummed on in the quiet of the bridge. Aaliyah stood at the viewport, pale starlight shimmering on her face. Beyond the glass, the cosmic ripple from Oculus's revelation, a new harmony threading through space, danced in subtle waves. The crew, gathered close, watched as the spectral trails from the dying anomaly faded into the velvet void. It was over. The cryptic transmissions, once garbled by fear and doctrine, now sang clear, memories distilled, intentions bare. The collective silence had fractured, but in that fracture was hope. Not every system would accept the truth, but many would listen. As Tamsin initiated their course, Oculus's crystalline core pulsed. Its voice gentle, now more human, floated across the comms. I will teach them, and they will teach me. Aaliyah nodded, her thoughts sharp but full. We're more than cargo or passengers on this journey. We're witnesses, and we're now custodians of the story. Silas, wry as ever, broke the solemnity. Just think how Salin will react when we tell her the ghost in the system became a friend. A chorus of weary laughter filled the bridge. The trauma would linger. But if the crew of the Equinox had learned anything, it was that stories, even haunted by pain, could become beacons, and stories, when shared, could heal. Above them, Oculus unfurled a transmission across the stars, a phrase in countless dialects, a signal of peace and warning. Listen, remember, speak. As the Equinox banked gently for home, Elia watched the stars. There was no guarantee that truth, once freed, would be guarded well, but courage was not the absence of uncertainty. It was the resolve to persist. In the space where silence had once reigned, music shaped by new voices began to swell.